When you look at these two cars, it's actually quite unfair to compare them because they are in completely different parts of the sports car world. They make different levels of power, different performance levels, completely different price points, but they have one key similarity that makes this comparison valid. They both have a flat plane crank V8. This is my 2018 Shelby GT350R, and this is my 2023 Corvette C8 Z06, and they are, to my knowledge, the only flat plane crank naturally aspirated V8s that any American car manufacturer has ever produced. And what's the big deal having a flat plane crank? Well, it allows an engine to rev higher, rev faster, deliver power, and deliver an emotional experience unlike anything else out there. European cars have had flat plane crank engines. It's much more common in their high-end sports cars, but for American cars, that's rare. When this came out, the Voodoo 5.2-liter V8, it was a big deal. The fact that a Mustang had a flat plane crank NA V8, and then Corvette had to go and beat it with the most powerful production NA V8 ever, the LT6. In terms of actual power numbers, the Voodoo is a 5.2-liter flat plane crank V8, naturally aspirated. It makes 526 horsepower and 429 pound-feet of torque, and redlines at a stratospheric 8,250 RPM. And then you look at the Z06. This, like I mentioned, the most powerful production NA V8 ever. It beats out the SLS Black Series. This 5.5-liter V8 makes 670 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, and redlines at 8,600 RPM. They're both rear-wheel drive. The Shelby is a manual-only 6-speed Tremec manual transmission, whereas the Z06, this Corvette generation, no longer has a manual transmission. This is an 8-speed dual clutch, also rear-wheel drive. Obviously, the drivetrain configuration is completely different, with this being a front engine, this being a mid-engine, but these are both amazing sports cars in their own ways, and just because they're both flat plane crank, and because they're both mine and I love them both, we're going to compare them today. When we take a look at the exterior styling of these cars, they also look nothing alike, mainly because of the engine placement. So the Z06 is mid-engine for this generation of Corvette, which means shorter front overhang, the engine sits behind you. The Shelby is classic front engine, rear-wheel drive, the longer hood. The proportions are completely different. They're both pretty aggressive in their own way. This is a 350R, which means a bigger front splitter, the bigger carbon fiber rear wing. We have some of these red accents there. This is actually a fairly rare color. It was 1 year lead foot gray, the black and red stripes. I did change a couple things up front. The turn signal DRL indicators up front to an LED look, and also from the factory, the 350R did come with carbon fiber wheels, which I haven't been running. I went to an aftermarket set of forged wheels. In terms of tires, this Shelby is running 305s up front, 325s out back, 19-inch wheels. Z06, even more aggressive. It's got 20-inch fronts, 21-inch rears. They're staggered fitment. The front tires are more narrow on the Z06. That seems to be a common thing with the mid-engine cars, so 275s, but the rears on the Z06 are 345s. Couple other things to talk about in terms of the styling. This, I think, is my favorite generation of Mustang. The S550 in Shelby form. It's just clean. The GT500 is more aggressive looking, wider front track and things like that, but I just think the 350R looks so good from every angle. It's simple, the tri-bar headlights and tail lights, the quad exhaust. I did a couple pieces of carbon fiber on it. Looks so good. Now the Z06, on the other hand, this one has the Z07 track package, which means it has the carbon fiber aero, which includes the front canards, the carbon fiber dive planes, the more aggressive front splitter, the massive fixed rear carbon fiber wing, and the Z06, all Z06s are much wider than the regular C8 Stingray. We're talking like about an inch on either side up front and even more out back, which is to accommodate the wider front track, the wider tires, the wider wheels, the massive side intake here. It just looks the part of a supercar. And being a mid-engine, you can look through that glass engine cover, see that 5.5-liter V8 out back, and the color. Oh, the color. When I was shopping for my Shelby 350, I bought it used. I could not find a grabber blue one. That was my favorite color combination, my dream spec. Could not find one. Ended up getting this lead foot gray. While ordering this Z06 brand new, man, I could pick whatever color I wanted. And this one, rapid blue, absolutely in love with it. This bright blue looks so good with the carbon fiber, the blacked out carbon flash badges, the blacked out exhaust tips. Everything about the Z06 is more aggressive, but it's a different look, a different personality. Mid-engine, big carbon aero wing, The Shelby, again, front engine, Mustang platform. They look cool in their own way, but if I had to pick between them, the Z06 does look cooler. That's a controversial opinion because I actually just posted a picture of all three cars and asked people in the comments, pick what's your favorite front end. And actually, a lot of people like the Shelby. Nothing bad about it. I just like the Z06 more. With that, let's check out the interior. We'll start with the Z06. So the Z06 is a much newer car. That Shelby's a 2018 model year, but that generation came out, I think, in 2015, whereas the C8 launched in 2020, and as a Z06, this is a 2023 model year, so tech is going to be a lot better, and also higher price points, so materials are better. This is a 3LZ with the two-tone blue interior, which covers all these surfaces in nice stitched blue leather with a suede headliner, a good amount of carbon fiber steering wheel, carbon fiber paddle shifters, a bit of the surround with a full digital cluster, which is quite nice. We have wireless CarPlay on the center screen here, wireless phone charger. The Z06 checks a lot of boxes. It has heated and cooled seats, heated steering wheel, heads-up display, digital rear view camera, front lift, front cameras, blind spot warning, fantastic Bose sound system. Like, it's not exactly fair to compare the two of them. One other big difference as soon as you get in the car is you feel like you're in a very different envelope because mid-engine, right? So you don't have much of a front overhang. You can see right forward. You have the big engine back there. So that immediately gives it a much more exotic feel. Whereas let's go hop in the Shelby, take a look at that interior. So you hop in the Shelby, got a cool little Ford Performance GT350 animation startup. It's a Mustang of this generation. They do a couple cool touches to make it more unique. So we have the chassis plaque here, which is 350R in the red. Mine is JR618. I believe that code is for 2018 model years. And then we have some gauges here, Shelby logos all over the place, bunch of red accents that really evoke the 350R trim here. The Recaro seats are quite nice. Having tracked this car, driven it on very nice curvy roads like Tail of the Dragon, they hold you in very well. After maybe 5-6 hours, they do get a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. And also, because this is a 350R, we have no back seats. Factory rear seat delete. This one does have an aftermarket harness bar in there. If you get a regular GT350, you would have back seats. And then the important thing, we have this Tremec 6-speed manual right here in the middle. Love this transmission. Couple toggles here. We have CarPlay, so it's got enough of the tech creature comforts, just not as fancy as a Z06. A lot of Alcantara, but then as befits the price point, there's going to be a lot more plastic surfaces all over this thing. And again, like I mentioned, sitting in here, even without driving and moving, it feels totally different. You're higher up. You see the hood extending out there because the engine is there versus behind you. Rear visibility in my Shelby is actually not that great. A, because I have the harness bar. B, the rear wing actually angles up a bit, so there's a decent cross-sectional area. So rear visibility is not fantastic out of the back of this thing. It doesn't have as many of those fancy tech features, but still a pretty nice place to be. Feels like a Mustang of this generation. The GT500, it does seem like they stepped that up quite a bit. But again, this is half the price of the Z06, so you can't quite compare them A to A. With that, let's take the Shelby for a drive. We're going to talk about what it's like, some of the dynamics, how it feels, and then hop in the Z06 and do a comparison. Both the 350 and the Z06 come with magnetic ride, which is fantastic because it means the vehicle can handle well, but it doesn't sacrifice ride comfort and quality. They're also both available with carbon fiber wheels. The 350R as standard, and they're optional on the Z06. And curb weights are actually surprisingly similar. From what I saw, they're both around 3,700 pounds. I did see the Z06 quoted at like 3,400, 3,500, but I think that might be dry weight. So some of the ingredients are, again, very similar, but driving dynamics are completely different personalities. One of the big things is obviously this one has a manual transmission, whereas the Z06 is a dual clutch, and then the engine placement that changes the experience entirely. Now, both of these cars are track capable. They are very much oriented for the track, especially this 350R being the R version. They really intended this to be the track car. It came on Michelin Cup 2 tires, carbon fiber wheels, the rear seat delete, the more aggressive aero pack, the cooling, everything needed to make this a track capable Mustang. That's the whole point of it being a Shelby GT350. Now, the Z06 also similar, especially the Z07 package that came with the Cup 2R tires, even more aggressive. We'll talk about that a bit more when we're in the Corvette. Now, they also both occupy the space where they are track-capable cars that are also good on the road. They don't go quite as extreme as something like a GT3 RS or a Huracan STO, which honestly, those aren't going to be that great on the road. They're actually fairly well-rounded in my opinion. This thing is just so nice to drive. So in terms of being well-rounded, the 350R on the road, day-to-day living with, is actually pretty awesome. Because of the manual transmission, because of that NA 5.2 flat plane crank V8, it's so engaging and exciting to drive at all speeds. Half throttle, full throttle, cruising to 45 miles an hour, downshifts, listening to that exhaust burble and pop is just a satisfying experience. Listen to this. That's halfway through the rev range. Are there faster cars for the money? Absolutely. But very few things for under $100,000 give you the driving joy, the emotion and engagement of a 350R. I truly do love this car. It is really, really special. I've taken this car on fairly long road trips, actually. The biggest one, I think, was from Chicago area all the way down to Tail of the Dragon. That was a many hour drive on the freeway. Comfortable, reasonably practical with a decent size, Mustang rear trunk. We've got the rear seats there, the delete, but I could put stuff back there too. And then when we got down to Tail of the Dragon and on those curvy roads, it was just absolutely amazing to drive. Similarity between the two of them is the fact that the engine doesn't make that much torque, right? If you're used to driving forced induction cars, turbo, supercharged ones, you see there's the mountain of torque low end. But with these high revving NA motors, under 4,000 RPM is really not going anywhere. It's making an amazing sound, but you have to get towards the top of the rev range for it to really start moving. And that 8,000 plus RPM red line with the manual transmission is just an amazing experience. A lot of the high revving motors, especially the new ones like a Porsche GT3, paired with a PDK, it does feel right at home. Speaking of the GT3 though, that's the one car that I would really replace this with. That's the one really special manual NA car that I've always been dreaming about. And because the Z06 is dual clutch only, I don't really feel that there's a direct overlap. I never thought of these two as competitors. I never really cross-shopped them directly. Just listen to that. That's special. That is so special. And it's such a good 6-speed manual. One of my favorites is Tremec. Compared to my Boss 302 Laguna Seca, which had one of the worst transmissions I've ever experienced, this is just so good. The clutch is pretty light, actually. Really easy to drive. You get comfortable in this car. Visibility is great. It's a pretty nice size. On the track, I actually prefer the 350R to the Z06. I think it's a bit nimbler. I think the steering on the 350R is more communicative. The Z06 is actually a little bit numb. There's no arguing the capabilities of the Z06 with Z07 pack are stratospherically higher, but it's the enjoyment, the emotion that the 350R brings, and that's what makes this car really special. With that, let's hop in the Z06. Oh, the Z06. So these are both NA flat plane crank V8s, relatively similar displacement, but as you just heard, they sound nothing alike, and honestly, they don't really feel anything alike either. The way the power delivery is, the way it revs out, completely different characters, and I'm just talking about the engine itself. A lot of people thought they would be fairly similar, and I thought, it's gonna have to feel relatively similar. Nah, completely different. The 350R, the Voodoo, honestly still is relatively close to like a muscle car V8. Yes, it's much more exotic, it's high revving, and I thought it was the most exotic like American V8 you could get until I drove this thing. The LT6 is race car. This is a Ferrari V8. The speed at which it revs out, the sounds are just unbelievable. I describe this car as a pissed off 458, and they did benchmark the 458, the Speciale, when they were developing this car. They took that ingredient and just turned it to 11 because it is a masterpiece of an engine. Now, the rest of the driving experience, the mid-engine aspect of it, really transforms it and makes it feel much more exotic to me. Because you have such a short overhang, you know that big engine is behind you, the weight transfer is very different. On the track, the Z06 is stupendous. It is so ridiculously good. The limits are so high, they are beyond what I honestly expected. Cup 2R tires are also race slicks. That's what the Z07 pack comes with. I have taken them off on this car because they are race slicks, right? So when it gets a little bit cold or if it rains, it's not fun. I got caught in the rain when driving the Z06 from California to Arizona, and I was in weather mode doing like 50 miles an hour, trying not to hydroplane. It was a little sketchy. So PS4S tires all around, much more well-rounded summer performance tire. Same thing on the Shelby. I'm on PS4S tires. The Cup 2 still have the carbon fiber wheels sitting in the garage. And that fact is a big reason why I didn't order the carbon fiber wheels on this car. They lower unsprung weight, which is really good for handling. It's sharper, faster, all of that. But they're quite expensive. I believe it was about a $12,000 option on this car. And the fact is, if you damage one, they're very, very expensive. And the fact that my entire 350R experience, I haven't really used the carbon wheels, I elected not to order them. I'll be, again, 100% honest, my driving capabilities are not so high that I can tell the difference between a carbon fiber wheel and a regular forged wheel, which is still pretty light. If I'm getting to that level, I could probably spend that $12,000 on advanced driver training with a coach on the track. Just getting more track time would yield a bigger difference. The driving experiences between the two cars are completely different. But within their relative segments and competitive set, I think they both bring such amount of driving enjoyment, the emotion and excitement compared to their competitors. For the money, if you're talking just power, straight line speed, performance, there are faster alternatives. For the Shelby, look at something like a Camaro ZL1, maybe a BMW M3 or M4, more power, forced induction. Could it be quicker? Absolutely. But the pairing of that 6-speed manual, the lighter weight, some of the track focus aspects of it makes the 350R, in my opinion, the most exciting car in that segment. Best driving thing under $100,000 in my opinion. Now for the Z06, that argument pales a little bit, A, because market price is extremely high on these, but B, because it actually is quite freaking ridiculously fast. This thing is rated at 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. Like, that's actually really alarmingly quick for a rear-wheel drive NA car. They just dialed in the traction control really well on these. Big carbon ceramic brakes. This Z06 will keep up with cars 2 to 3 times the price. Huracan, Technica, Porsche GT4 RS, GT3s. It'll take like a top tier car, maybe like a McLaren 765 LT, to beat out this, which is really impressive. It does punch above its weight class. Problem is, market price brought this thing into another weight class, pricing wise. This one, $150K is MSRP. I've seen between $50,000 to $100,000 over sticker as kind of the norm for a Z06, especially with a Z07 package, just because they can't get them now. Chevy's not specifically limiting this car for any reason. It's just supply and demand. They're building as many as they can, and people really want them because it's a truly special car, which means it has a pretty high price. I've talked about this at length in some other videos, did a full breakdown on how much I paid for this specific car, how it was optioned. So, in terms of value, comparing them next to each other is not fair because this is more than twice the base MSRP of the Shelby 350R as option. So I just said base MSRP and has option. So 70K versus 150K, more than twice for this car. So that's not fair. But relative to kind of the market conditions and the markup and the demand and things like that, there's another similarity between these two flat plane crank NA production V8 American sports cars. If I had to pick one, it's going to be the Z06. I just did one of these videos comparing the Z06 to my R8 RWS, and the Z06 was also the one that I would go with. This is my new favorite child. I love this car. I've told everybody, this is the best car that I have ever owned. It is absolutely phenomenal. One of the best cars I've ever driven, and I've been fortunate to drive a lot of really cool cars. But between R8, GT350R, and Z06, it's going to be harder to let go of the GT350R because it's such a different ingredient set. The manual rear-wheel drive flat plane crank. R8 and this are essentially direct overlaps. Mid-engine, dual clutch, rear-wheel drive, two-seaters, in which case this just demolishes the R8 in every single way. It's just hands down way, way better. But the 350R has, again, the unique, it's different. It offers a completely different kind of driving experience. And because of that, it makes it so much more difficult to pick. But if I had to pick one car, it would have to be this one, even though the dollar numbers don't make any sense when you're trying to compare the two of them. But just because they're both American flat plane crank V8 sports cars, I'm doing this video. They're both iconic. They're so special. If I sell the Shelby, I will probably end up buying a Shelby again in the future. This car, I can't imagine why I'd want to replace it. Is the Z06 worth twice as much? I think it delivers twice as much as holistic sports car experience. It's very well rounded. It does so many things really well. The only detriment on the Z06 is I get terrible fuel economy. 13 mpg over the last 2,000 miles. The Shelby actually is not bad. 6th gear cruise, and you can get into, I think, the 20s. But this thing is just so hilariously thirsty. I think the gearing is more aggressive for the Z06, despite being 8 gears, 8 speeds. You're not buying either of these cars for fuel economy. Love both of these cars. Wanted to share some thoughts and compare the two of them. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the one I did of the Z06 versus the R8. Even closer overlap between the two. I think that was an easier decision. This one, thought long and hard, but Z06 is my new favorite child. It's just the best thing. It has supercar levels of road presence, performance. It feels like a race car. It is so capable, has all the tech and creature comforts you want. Good job, Corvette team. But for performance, that 350R will always hold a special place in my heart. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, thanks for all the support. And on the way out, let's do one more. Red line pull. What a machine.